biggest mistake today is trusting your strongest feeling too quickly. Strong feelings can make small events look huge. From August 18th through August 20th, your body may react fast. Your mind may create answers even faster. The real message may stay hidden at first. It may only appear after the pressure starts to fade. Do not decide too soon that the feeling means nothing. Do not decide that it means everything. Stay until the end. The most important clue comes later. It appears when you notice what your body no longer wants to accept. What makes this period so confusing is that it rarely arrives with one neat emotion. A clean bad mood would almost be easier. Instead, the signal tends to come mixed. You can feel impatient and tired at the same time, exposed and numb at the same time, certain that something needs your attention and yet completely unable to say exactly what it is. That combination is why so many people misread this kind of shift. They assume the feeling must be irrational because it is hard to label. In reality, the body often reacts first when pressure has been building quietly for too long. It senses the mismatch before the conscious mind builds a story around it. That does not mean every strange feeling is sacred. It does mean the first message may not come in words. From a spiritual and energetic point of view, August 18th through 20th carries a very specific shape. The emotional tone deepens first. Then, the pressure to act increases, and only afterward does clarity begin to return. In other words, the body receives the surge before the mind receives the map. That is why Tuesday can feel so strange. The deeper part of you notices the shift immediately, but your surface mind keeps trying to blame whatever is closest. It blames the delayed text, the small disappointment, the schedule, the noise, the person who was slightly off with you. Sometimes those things matter, but often they are only the hook that the feeling grabbed onto after it arrived. The energy comes first. The explanation usually comes later. A lot of people experience this as bodily contradiction. You want space, but silence feels too loud. You want rest, but your nervous system won't fully settle. You feel like talking to someone, yet the thought of being misunderstood feels exhausting. Your body asks for relief, but not in the obvious ways. Food does not quite fix it. Scrolling does not fix it. Pushing harder does not fix it. Even distraction can feel thin. That is usually the first clue that the message is deeper than mood. Simple moods accept simple exits. An energy shift that is trying to get your attention often does the opposite. It lingers through your usual coping patterns, not to punish you, but to force honesty where convenience has been running the show. That honesty can take several forms. For some people, it feels like irritation, which is often grief or overwhelm, moving too fast to be recognized. For others, it shows up as unusual sensitivity, where a normal interaction suddenly reveals how long you have been swallowing your real reaction. Another group feels it as flattening, almost like disconnection, as if your system has decided it cannot keep producing enthusiasm on command. None of those responses should be reduced to a single spiritual cliché. What matters is the direction of the signal. Is your body telling you that something has gone too far, lasted too long, or stopped feeling true? If so, this period can act like a pressure point. It does not necessarily create the issue. It exposes the issue more clearly. That is why days like these unsettle people. They do not only make you feel more, they make you feel more honestly than usual. If you have been tolerating a pace that drains you, your body may suddenly resist it. If you have been calling something manageable when it actually feels lonely, the loneliness may get louder. If you have been pretending you are fine with a pattern that quietly hurts you, the hurt can stop cooperating with the performance. The body becomes the place where denial starts to fail. This is not always dramatic on the outside. It can happen in quiet moments that would look completely ordinary to anyone else. You answer one message and feel your whole stomach tighten. You start a task and your energy evaporates. You look around your own life and feel strangely absent from it. One of the reasons this window holds attention so strongly is that it tempts people to make immediate meaning out of temporary intensity. The feeling is real, but the first interpretation is not always accurate. That distinction matters. When energy sharpens the body, the mind rushes to explain the discomfort as fast as it can. It wants a villain, a decision, a headline, a conclusion. That is where people get themselves into trouble. They mistake urgency for truth. They assume that because something feels undeniable, it must also be fully understood. It usually is not. The wiser approach is to treat the feeling as evidence that something needs attention, while refusing to let the first wave decide the final story. Awareness is the assignment. Immediate reaction is usually the trap. If today has carried conflict energy, pay close attention to the kind of conflict it is. Some tension is clean. It points to a real boundary, a real inconsistency, a real disrespect, or a truth that has needed words for a long time. Other tension is distorted. It magnifies a small trigger because the nervous system was already overloaded before the trigger arrived. During August 18th through 20th, both can happen close together, which is why discernment matters more than drama. A rough conversation does not automatically mean the relationship is wrong. At the same time, the fact that the timing is intense does not magically cancel real patterns either. The body can be reactive and revealing at the same time. Your job is not to suppress that complexity. Your job is to slow it down enough to hear what kind of signal you are actually receiving. There is also a quieter version of this shift that people often overlook because it does not look emotional in the obvious way. Sometimes the message arrives as brain fog, forgetfulness, low motivation, or the bizarre feeling that you cannot gather yourself into a straight line. You know what needs to be done, but your energy will not meet the task. You keep reaching for focus and finding static instead. That can be frustrating, especially if you are used to solving discomfort by becoming more efficient. Yet that exact frustration may be the message. The body is not always asking for productivity. Sometimes it is forcing a pause because your inner world is carrying more unprocessed material than your schedule can absorb. On days like this, lack of smooth performance may be information, not failure. Notice how private the symptoms usually are. You may appear functional to everyone around you while internally feeling like something has tilted. That isolation is part of what makes the experience so compelling. It creates the illusion that everyone else is moving normally and you alone have become strange. In reality, many people are walking through the exact same energetic weather with different symptoms. One person becomes snappish, another gets silent, someone else feels unusually tender, another person cannot settle their thoughts enough to complete basic routines without strain. Shared pressure rarely looks identical from the outside, which is why it so often goes unnamed. But when a collective shift is present, the body becomes a translator. Each person speaks a slightly different dialect of the same underlying tension. I want to be careful here, because not every body signal should be romanticized into destiny. If you are dealing with ongoing or severe physical symptoms, exhaustion, panic, pain, or anything concerning. Practical support matters and real care matters. Spiritual framing should never become an excuse to avoid what needs proper attention. But within that truth, there is another truth. Your body very often registers emotional, energetic, and relational strain long before your polished self-description catches up. It knows when you are overriding yourself. It knows when your yes is not a full yes. It knows when your smile is doing extra labor. During intense windows like this one, that inner knowing becomes louder. The goal is not to dramatize every sensation. The goal is to stop treating your internal responses as meaningless background noise. So what is special about August 18th through 20th? Think of it as a three-stage corridor. The 18th opens the emotional undercurrent. It brings hidden material closer to the surface and makes feelings stronger, deeper, and harder to ignore. The 19th increases pressure. What rose quietly now starts demanding response, choice, motion, or honesty. By the 20th, the atmosphere begins to loosen, and with that loosening comes perspective. The intensity does not vanish instantly, but its grip changes. The first 2 days feel immersive. The third day starts to separate you from the feeling enough that you can understand it. That progression is important because it tells you not only what the experience is, but when to do what. Feel first, observe second, decide later. The 18th often feels the strangest because it does not need a big external event to hit. It can move through mood, dreams, memory, desire, and bodily sensitivity before anything obvious happens in the day. People wake already carrying something they cannot name. Others feel fine until late morning, then suddenly notice that their usual patience is thinner, their reactions are hotter, or their need for withdrawal is stronger than normal. This is usually the stage where hidden truth starts pressing upward. Old grief can visit without warning. Resentment you thought was manageable can suddenly taste sharper. Even desire can become more revealing, not just sexual desire, but the desire for freedom, quiet, honesty, distance, depth, or relief. The body starts pointing toward what it needs before the ego is ready to admit it. By the evening of the 18th, many people become tempted to do too much with what they are feeling. The pressure to define the whole thing shows up fast. You may want to send the message, confront the person, make the decision, cancel the plan, confess the feeling, or cut something off before you have really sat with what surfaced. That is not because the feeling is false. It is because intensity loves immediacy. It tells you that clarity must be seized right now or it will disappear. In reality, genuine clarity survives a night of space. Distorted urgency usually does not. That is a rule worth remembering whenever the body feels louder than the mind. Strong feelings deserve respect. They do not always deserve instant execution. The 19th tends to feel more active. If the 18th exposes, the 19th pushes. This is the point where internal discomfort may start looking for an outlet. People become more likely to over-explain, overreact, overpromise, or over-identify with the emotion of the moment. A person who was quietly overwhelmed on Tuesday can become unusually blunt on Wednesday. Someone who felt oddly disconnected can suddenly decide everything in their life must change at once. The pressure to do something becomes harder to resist because the energy now wants movement, not just awareness. That is why the 19th can be productive if handled well and messy if handled impulsively. It is good for noticing where truth lives. It is dangerous for locking that truth into the first dramatic decision it suggests. Physically, the 19th can bring the most noticeable signs. You may feel tension in the jaw, digestive sensitivity, an odd internal buzzing, a need to pace, trouble staying fully present, or the sense that your body is carrying a conversation you have not yet had. Some people feel wide awake mentally, but tired in the limbs. Others feel emotionally heavy, yet weirdly stimulated. That contradiction is not unusual during a pressure day. The system is spending energy on processing, not just on action. So if your body feels louder than your to-do list, that is not laziness. It may simply mean your inner world has moved to the front of the line. Respecting that does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means adjusting how hard you push while the deeper material is moving through. Then comes the 20th, and this is where people finally start to breathe differently. Relief often does not arrive as joy first. It arrives as space. The feeling that was crowding every thought begins to loosen its grip. The body still remembers the last 48 hours, but the mind starts separating from them. This is when perspective becomes possible. You may wake up and realize that one issue is still real, but the level of panic attached to it is lower. Or you may notice that something which felt huge now feels oddly manageable. That shift matters. It helps you tell the difference between a real message and an exaggerated atmosphere. What remains meaningful after the pressure begins to lift is usually the part worth taking seriously. Even then, not everything clears at once. Some haze can linger into the 20th, especially if the previous 2 days brought up old material, unresolved conversations, or fatigue you have been postponing. But the quality of the haze changes. Instead of being trapped inside the weather, you start looking at the weather. That subtle difference is everything. It moves you from reactivity into interpretation. It turns the body from a fire alarm into a source of information. Once that happens, you can finally ask better questions. Not, why am I like this? But what exactly was this trying to show me? Not, who do I need to blame? But what pattern became impossible to ignore? Not, how do I get rid of this feeling? But what has this feeling been protecting, revealing, or interrupting? There is one simple test I want you to use before acting on anything significant during this window. Ask yourself, if I wait until tomorrow, does the truth of this feel stronger, weaker, or simply clearer? That question is powerful because it separates signal from surge. If something is real, a little delay does not destroy it. Honest boundaries still matter tomorrow. Real concerns still matter tomorrow. Necessary conversations still matter tomorrow. What delay often removes is the distortion layered on top of the truth. It strips away the urge to perform your emotion at peak volume. If the pressure is bodily, give the body a task. Movement is far more useful than silent overthinking during a window like this. Take a hard walk, stretch until you actually feel your breath change. Clean something with focus. Pace and talk into your notes app. Put your hands in motion so the charge has somewhere to go. Energy that has no channel turns theatrical very quickly. It makes small thoughts feel apocalyptic. It makes ordinary discomfort feel like a final verdict. Once the body starts moving, the emotional field often becomes more readable. You do not move to escape the feeling. You move so the feeling stops circling in one closed system. Many people call this grounding, but it is really translation. The body settles enough that truth can separate from adrenaline. After movement, right before you decide anything, keep it brutally simple. Begin with the sentence, "What I actually feel right now is," and do not edit the first 3 lines. Then continue with, "What this feeling seems to be reacting to," is, and after that, what I do not want to admit is, those prompts work because they bypass performance. They move you past the polished version of your emotions and into the raw one. This window responds well to private honesty, not public dramatics, not vague spiritual language, not proving a point to somebody else, just honest contact with what is truly there. Once you write it down, you can come back on the 20th and see what remained true after the pressure eased. That is where real guidance usually lives. If a conversation needs to happen, let it happen in stages. You do not have to choose between silence and explosion. There is a middle skill that many people forget during intense energy windows: naming without unloading. You can say, "Something important came up for me, and I want to talk about it when I'm clearer." That protects both the truth and the timing. It honors the signal without handing the whole exchange over to the most charged version of yourself. Deep conversations are not made deeper by bad timing. They are made cleaner by emotional accuracy. There is nothing weak about waiting until the body has stopped shouting. In fact, some of the most honest things you will ever say only become possible once urgency steps out of the room. At the same time, be careful not to use the phrase, "it's just the energy," to excuse what should not be excused. Intense days can distort reactions, but they can also reveal existing fractures. If someone repeatedly makes you feel small, dismissed, manipulated, or unsafe, a spiritually charged Tuesday does not erase that pattern. Likewise, if you keep abandoning your own needs until your body has to scream to get your attention, the answer is not to blame the calendar and move on. The point of a window like this is not to turn everything into fate. It is to illuminate what your normal pace lets you avoid. Use the shift to see more clearly, not to become less accountable. Truth and intensity may arrive together, but they are not identical things. One of the themes most likely to surface between August 18th and 20th is misalignment between your outer life and your inner truth. Where are you performing steadiness instead of living it? Where are you staying accessible when you really need space? Where are you calling something temporary even though it has become a pattern? The body tends to react most strongly where the gap is largest. That is why one area of life may suddenly feel more emotionally loaded than it did a few days ago. The energy is not necessarily creating drama in that area. It may simply be withdrawing your ability to ignore it. When the gap between what you say and what you feel gets too wide, the body often becomes the first place where the truth starts leaking through. Another reason Tuesday can feel so uncanny is that collective shifts often move through the mundane. The strange energy does not always arrive during ceremonial moments. It arrives while answering emails, driving home, walking through a store, folding clothes, or staring at a screen too long. That ordinariness is what makes the feeling so destabilizing. You expect big revelations to come with obvious signs, but many of the most important internal shifts begin as quiet discomfort in ordinary settings. A normal room suddenly feels emotionally crowded. A routine task reveals how tired you really are. A tiny interruption exposes how little margin you have left. When the extraordinary arrives inside the ordinary, people often doubt it. Do not doubt it too quickly. Quiet signals are still signals. Sleep may become part of the message during this period too. The 18th into the 19th can intensify dreams, restless sleep, or waking with an emotional residue you cannot immediately explain. Then, the 19th into the 20th often helps clarify what was only symbolic at first. Pay attention to what repeats. not necessarily in literal images, but in emotional themes. Are you dreaming of missing trains, locked rooms, old homes, unfinished conversations, searching, hiding, or being late? Those patterns often mirror waking pressure more honestly than your daytime self-description does. You do not need to become superstitious about every dream. Just notice whether your nights are processing what your days have not slowed down enough to feel. The body and psyche keep talking after the schedule goes dark. For some people, the message in this window is grief. Not always dramatic grief tied to one event, but the quieter grief of self-betrayal, loneliness, missed timing, or realization. You understand that a season has ended emotionally before you have fully accepted it mentally, or you feel sadness for the version of yourself that kept trying to make something work after it had already become expensive. This kind of grief is easy to misread as weakness. It is not weakness. It is information. It means something inside you is no longer willing to carry the same illusion at full weight. If tears show up without a perfectly neat explanation, resist the urge to interrogate them too quickly. Some truths arrive in moisture before they arrive in language. For others, the signal is not sadness, but anger, and anger also deserves careful reading. Anger is often the body's way of reintroducing a boundary after a period of silence. It can be immature, yes. It can also be corrective. The key question is whether the anger is pointing toward a real line that has been crossed, or whether it is simply the nervous system demanding relief from overload. Usually, there is some of both. That is why raw anger should be heard, but not immediately obeyed. Let it tell you what feels invaded, overused, disrespected, or overextended. Then come back later and choose the form that truth should take. Anger can deliver the message. It should not always be allowed to write the final script. Fatigue is another major messenger here, especially for people who usually push past their own limits without much internal negotiation. If you feel suddenly tired in a way that rest alone does not fully explain, ask what emotional labor your body has been financing in the background. Have you been absorbing too much from other people, staying available beyond your real capacity, translating your needs into more acceptable language so nobody gets uncomfortable? That kind of hidden expenditure adds up. During ordinary weeks, you may outpace it. During a pressure window, the bill arrives. The body slows you down because your inner resources are no longer consenting to business as usual. In that sense, fatigue can be a boundary that the conscious mind never learned how to state directly. What should you not do between August 18th and 20th? Do not make a permanent judgment in the peak of temporary intensity. Do not confuse emotional magnitude with total accuracy. Do not send the final message if the first message will do. Do not stack stimulation on top of stimulation until you can no longer tell what is yours. Be careful with doom scrolling, revenge fantasies, impulsive confessions, overpromising, and assuming the most wounded interpretation is automatically the deepest one. Intense energy often seduces people with false profundity. It makes everything feel final, fated, and absolute. Very little actually is. Protecting yourself during a window like this is not about denial. It is about refusing to let the loudest version of the feeling become the only version that counts. What should you do instead? Narrow the field, lower the noise, drink water slowly, move your body, delay the dramatic reply, write what surfaced, cancel what does not truly need to happen. Protect the evening. If you can, create one pocket of privacy where your nervous system does not have to keep performing. That can be 10 quiet minutes in a parked car, A shower without your phone, a walk after dark, or sitting on the edge of your bed and telling yourself the truth in plain words. Energy shifts become much more manageable when they are witnessed instead of acted out. You do not need a perfect ritual. You need enough honesty and enough slowness that the body does not have to keep escalating to be heard. By the time the 20th unfolds, most people begin noticing one of two things. Either the feeling softens and you realize it was amplifying a temporary overload, or the feeling softens and reveals a more stable truth underneath it. Both outcomes are useful. If it was mostly temporary, then you just avoided making a larger problem out of a passing storm. If it was revealing something real, you now have a much better chance of responding to that truth with steadiness instead of emotional spillover. This is why patience is not passivity in spiritual work. Patience is often the container that keeps truth from getting mixed with chaos. The body gets to speak first, but wisdom should still get the last word. There is something reassuring hidden inside all of this. Strange days feel personal while they are happening. They make people think they are failing in some private way, that they are the only one feeling irrational, reactive, heavy, or overstimulated by small things. Usually, they are not. The same pressure that hits you as irritability may be hitting someone else as silence, someone else as tears, and someone else as exhaustion. Remembering that does not solve the whole experience, but it prevents a second layer of suffering, the layer that says, something must be wrong with me for this to feel so intense. No. Sometimes the weather changes inside people all at once. The symptoms vary. The loneliness is what lies, and that may be the deepest message your body is trying to hand you between August 18th and 20th. Not that you are broken, not that every feeling is prophecy, not that every urge deserves action. The message may be simpler and more important than that. It may be telling you where pressure has exceeded truth, where performance has exceeded capacity, where silence has exceeded safety, or where your inner life has gone too long without being met honestly. Energy shifts are uncomfortable, partly because they interrupt momentum. Yet sometimes interruption is mercy. It stops the pattern long enough for you to notice the cost. It breaks the trance of habit. It makes the body impossible to ignore, which is often the first step back toward yourself. So if Tuesday has felt strange, do not rush to flatten it into a neat explanation before it has finished speaking. Let the 18th reveal. Let the 19th intensify without owning you. Let the 20th sort signal from surge. Watch what lingers after the pressure changes. That is the part with meaning. If you need a simple rule for this entire window, use this one. Feel fully, act slowly, and interpret after the atmosphere loosens. That approach will protect you from turning a passing wave into a life decision while still allowing the deeper truth to find you. Some messages arrive as thoughts. Others arrive as symptoms, silence, fatigue, and heat behind the eyes. When your body speaks in that language, the wisest response is not panic. It is attention. If this message found you on a day that already felt a little too sharp, a little too heavy, or a little too revealing, take that as your invitation to slow down tonight. Notice what your system has been trying to tell you without demanding instant perfection from yourself. Then come back tomorrow and see what remains true when the pressure shifts. That is where your real guidance begins. And if you want to compare notes, tell me what this Tuesday actually felt like for you. Was it restlessness, sadness, body tension, brain fog, unusual sensitivity, or the sudden sense that something in your life could no longer be ignored? However it showed up, you were never the only one feeling it.